Today we will be replacing, what do you call those things? Okay, as you can see, the left side we have what are commonly known as MILs, or malfunction indicator lamps, and there are bulbs behind these, and if you turn the car on, every single one should light up and then will go out after about 1 or 2 seconds. Okay, including one for low fuel. But as you can see, or maybe not, my water temperature, which is right next to the fuel gauge, the bulbs burn out, and part of the speedometer. Tachometer, all the bulbs there look okay, but the right side of the speedometer is out. Not as likely that I'm going to get above 80 miles an hour right now anyway, but it's always good to have that side illuminated. Today we'll be replacing the bulbs in the instrument cluster, also known as your gauge cluster. Now on the 4th generation 626, there's only 3 screws holding in your gauge cluster bezel, and you just remove those 3 screws. So basically all you need for this entire operation is a Phillips head screwdriver. Now on the 5th generation 98 to 2002, you're going to have to first take up your center console and your cup holders, which comes in one piece I believe, then your knee panel, which goes here, then your dash bezel, and then your instrument cluster bezel. All of that to get to the back of your harness is back there. You might be able to do it, disconnect the harness from the back. That's a neat thought, is to just try and come up at it from underneath. But that's going to be a really hard operation. It might just be easier to take apart your dash panels on the 5th gen. But in either case, we're going to be taking this out and showing you how to replace bulbs on a 4th gen 1993 to 1997 Mazda 66. And it doesn't matter if it's an i4 or V6, it's the same exact configuration. And the same exact configuration if your steering wheel is on the wrong side of the car for European or Asian versions. We will be replacing the bulbs with the 194s, which is the larger size, and the 73, which is the smaller size bulb. The bulbs get smaller with the smaller number, so a number 1 bulb would be probably the size of an atom or something like that. 194 is much larger, and then when you get into 2-300s, we're talking really large bulbs. So that's how the bulb size goes, and that's in North America. I know that Europeans, you guys have a different bulb labeling system, but there should be a conversion online somewhere that you can figure out exactly which size in 194 and 73 equals. So that's not really a big deal for you. Alright, so to make it easier on yourself, drop your steering wheel. Okay, and then you just remove your bezel like so. It's probably going to be clipped in. There we go. And this is just matting that will end up going up here, kind of like so. So you just set that up there. And after you get your bezel out, you will have 4 screws, 1, 2, and then 3, 4 up there. I've already removed the top 2. Now this is kind of tricky, so you're going to have to angle it so that the bottom 2 tabs pull out first. And remember, you're going to have a wiring harness, you're going to have a couple wiring harnesses plugged in on the back of here. So when you pull this out, try and set it down right here. As you tilt it forward, you want to bring these 2 tabs up as level as you can and then pull straight out this way, like so. You're going to have to clear those bulb housings on the back and your harness. You pull it out about as far as you can, then just let that sit. In order to remove this clear plastic housing, what you should do is get your heat gun, and you want to heat up all the epoxy that is surrounding this. This is held in with epoxy, and I've already done this a long time ago. I just did it by hand, by twisting and pinching and cracking the glass to the point where now this glass piece will just come right off. However, doing so comes with a word of caution. If you do it like that, there's a very good chance that you will end up putting a really big split in your glass, as I've seen many people do. The correct way, the proper way to do this is by using a heat gun or hair dryer until you can soften the epoxy that holds this this glass piece or plastic, I don't know, plexiglass piece on. And then you would slowly deform the glue to the point where you could kind of peel it off. And as you can see, there's plenty of dust inside of here, so this needs to be cleaned and redone. And again, the proper way to put it back on is to again use epoxy and then set it back on there. And as you can see, I've painted my dash bezel itself, which you can do. This is much easier if you just pull this whole thing out. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll get to the harness back here. We'll unclip this harness. There's one harness, plug connector. There's 2, 3. So here are your harnesses that will be plugged up behind your instrument cluster, and you can tap into these for, you know, for whatever reason if you need to. But as you can see, not every single one of these will have a pin in them, and that depends on your trim level. Like for instance, I don't have the immobilizer system, so I'm not going to have an immobilizer pin that feeds the immobilizer light. So that's something to, so that's just a neat difference. You can flip this cluster over and inspect it. You can see there's tape here, so I want to inspect what's behind that tape. Looks okay. I know what the tape is for. The tape is actually for this this PCB. This is not a hard PCB. This is a film PCB. See, it's just a film. This entire piece of film is then folded over the back and then taped onto the back of here. Let's say if your gauge cluster goes out and you need to replace the gauge cluster, you would just need to just take this piece of film with you from a junkyard. You wouldn't need to take everything. We are here to replace the bulbs, and for bulb replacement, the large bulbs, these are going to be 194. All of these small ones are going to be 73. I need to figure out which side was giving me the issue. Up here, these lights stopped working. Now that could be a short because I have modified that circuit recently, but then there was a light up in this area that was not working as well. I'm gonna go ahead and guess that this bulb needs to be replaced, and these bulbs, or some of these bulbs. I don't know which ones, so I'm gonna take them out and inspect them. But my guess is, and you just twist this because that's on a contact. You just twist that and take it out, and sure enough, that one is burnt through. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the filament in there is definitely broken. So let's go ahead and replace that bulb. In order to remove this bulb, all you have to do is pull straight out of the housing, like so. But if you have a problem with pulling this out of the housing, it gets stuck for whatever reason, one trick is to wrap a rubber band around it so that you can get more grip. And that will happen especially for these really small bulbs, the 73s. Wrap a rubber band around it, and you can either try using it with your hands. If that doesn't work, use a pair of pliers on it. Be really gentle because you will crack that glass really easy. But with the rubber band, it will take some of that grip, and that should allow you to get even the most stuck bulb out of here. Okay, so we are going to replace the new bulb, and you never want to use your hands on this. You don't want any fingerprints on that whatsoever. After I use my fingers on this, I'll take a rag and kind of wipe it off a little bit to try and get my fingerprints off. But really, you should be using rubber gloves. Rubber gloves are the absolute best way to deal with installing these bulbs. And it doesn't matter which side contact you put when you put it back in place. We'll just keep going around and checking all the bulbs. Now these 73s are really hard to tell if they're burnt out or not. Well, this is going to be a really good example. The 194 had absolutely no problem, just pulled right out. But these little 73s, these things are hard to pull out because there's barely any room to grip it. You go to grip this bulb and there's just, it just keeps wanting to slide off. I can't get a grip on it. So what I'm going to do is wrap a rubber band around it. The thicker the rubber band, the better. No, that does not want to work either. So I'm actually going to try and use pliers next. Take your bulb, wrap a couple turns around the bulb with the rubber band. The thicker the rubber band, the easier it is to do. Just get a pair of pliers and be careful not to be too hard on this. There's a good chance that I'll break this doing this. No. That is frustrating. There we go. So use the pliers and the rubber band to kind of loosen it up a little bit. That makes a big difference. Take your new bulb and insert it back down in there. Alright, put that in. The back of your gauge cluster will be labeled. In case you need to do any diagnostics to it, you can see the PCB traces. This one says temp sensor, ground, fuel sensor, illumination, ignition. It also has diodes that show you the flow, fuel meter, ignition gauge, tachometer, high beams, check engine. This PCB is all labeled very well. And so if you need to come in here and do some diagnostics, you can. Hopefully I won't need to do that. Hopefully it's just a bulb. But I'm not sure how well you can see this, but there's some bubbling occurring here on the PCB, and that might have something to do with it, as well as up here. So that's not good. Okay, now in order to remove your faceplate, let's say you want to paint your faceplate or customize it in the future, I'm actually thinking I might want to wrap that in carbon fiber vinyl. I think that would look pretty neat. Okay. And there's your faceplate. This glass piece here, this plastic piece, is heat molded in, so you can't remove this. So if you go to paint this, you have to mask off this little glass area, and that's the only area that you would have to mask off. Everything else you just straight up paint. And it's really easy to paint. And as you can see, I've painted mine gold. It came out looking fairly well. I'm pretty happy with it, and it's held up really well over, I don't know, I did this in maybe 2001, something like that. But without the bezel, you can see that's the inside of your gauge cluster. That's how that works. And you can see somewhat all of the lights that you have installed on your faceplate. And your trim level will determine your faceplate. I have a 1995 2.0 liter automatic, so my faceplate is R3 on this side and L3 on this side. As you will notice, some of your bulbs are actually colored, and these are gel coatings that are put on at the factory. What you can do is kind of heat these up a little bit and make them malleable and basically stick them on the end of your new bulbs. Or you can use green marker and basically color the bulb with green marker. If you're real careful, you can actually peel this off the end just like a condom. Just roll it off the end there. There's your bulb. And just make sure you get that centered up, and you can start rolling it back on your new bulb. Ta-da! And that's how you would replace your color bulbs. Now here's a good example of what can happen to the gel coats when the bulbs burn out. It will actually melt the gel coat to the bulb itself. This is an obviously burnt out bulb. It's black on the one side right where it's attached to the gel coat. But if you're real careful, you can peel the gel coat off, and you're left with just the burnt out bulb. So that's obviously a burnt out bulb. And in order to reinstall, again, you just find the center of it and then kind of roll it on. Yes, you will get your fingerprints all over this, which is why I recommend using rubber gloves. But the one thing you want to try and save is your gel coats. So those things can last your entire lifetime if you're careful with them. Now, a lot of guys, when they replace these, they just throw them away. They throw the bulb away because they don't know they can just take it off and replace it on the new bulb. Pretty interesting, huh? Well, something like that. I guess it stretches a little bit over time, so yeah, now that actually really looks like a condom, but whatever. So you go to install it and you just put it in and twist it in. While you have your gauge cluster out, I recommend that you just go through and you check all of your bulbs. You know, even if all of your bulbs are working, some of them might not be as bright as they once were. So you can have a really good illuminated dash just by replacing all the bulbs. Yes, it'll be expensive to replace all the bulbs in one shot. It'll probably cost you $50 to $60 to replace all the bulbs. You know, if that's what you want to do, you can do that, as well as find LED replacements. There are LED replacements available for these so that it's less prone to heat and might have a lighter output. And one thing that Monoxide Child did was he took this entire faceplate, this entire PCB area off, and he ran EL wire along with this. And you can find one of these ground circuits and power circuit. This is the green illumination. So you would trace this PCB back to inside the housing, you know, up in here somewhere, and you would plug into one of those wires. And then as well as find a ground circuit. So GND, that's a ground circuit, and you would find where that goes, and then plug the other side of the ground wire for the illumination along with that. So you can run EL wire inside of here. And if you've seen Monoxide Child's gauge cluster, I mean, the thing is really bright. It's all red LED, red everything, and it looks really, really good. And because it looks that good, it's something that I can recommend to you. I have not done it, but I've seen the results, and the results speak for themselves. Check out Monoxide Child on the Mazda626.net forums to see what he did. It looks really good, and you can do it in any color that you want. And as for the gel caps, don't ask me where to find different color replacements for those, because I have no idea. That's something that you're going to have to find out yourself. I have absolutely no idea. I'm just showing you how to replace these. All right. For customizations, you're on your own. Make sure everything snaps down nice and secure. Just reinstall in the order of reverse. Okay, so here we are at night, and we're going to check the operation of our bulbs. See how they fared. Okay. Now I have the right side of my speedometer again. Pretty nice. Everything looks nice and bright, nice and illuminated. That looks particularly better. Because I switched out that one as well. Check the operation of the high beams. High beams come on. That light is a little dim, so I'm probably going to end up looking at replacing that one eventually. The high beam indicator should be a lot brighter than that. But everything looks like it checks out. Blink, blink. Car being in park is currently not illuminated. No matter what gear I select, even if I select the reverse gear for instance, that light does not illuminate. And I have a feeling I shorted that out because I'm feeding 12 volts directly to the instrument cluster, and I got a feeling that it should be more like 1 or 2 volts kind of thing. So yeah, that's my fault. That wiring is gonna have to be redone and that video amended, because I got a feeling that I shorted out my my lights there, my gear selector lights. Maybe it's just me, but they look dim. All my lights look dim. Oh, it's probably my battery. My battery needs to be charged. I'm probably down to, I don't know, probably closer to 10 volts now because of how long I had the car door open during the entire process. Probably for an hour or so, something like that. Down to about 11 volts now, which is just on the edge of being able to start the car or run the car. Anything below 10.5 volts and you're not going to be able to start the car. Ideally you want to be above 12.4 or 12.5 volts. I guess that's the nominal voltage. You really want to be at 13 or 14 volts. That's really good. On a 12 volt battery system, you want to be above 12 volts. Let's just put it that way. And I'm below 12 volts, so that's why my lights, including all of these over here, are fairly dim compared to what I'm normally used to. And that's basically all there is to replacing your bulbs in your gauge cluster. And then just reinstall everything in a reverse order. You're good to go. Cool.